Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our 113th PAVE virtual panel. We are really excited for this conversation today. Texas has become such an epicenter of trucking that we are actually devoting two conversations to the topic. Today, we are speaking with various leaders to look at a big picture of Texas and trucking, and then next Wednesday, we are going to do a deeper dive looking at other issues, including first responders. But really wanted to jump in today to introduce our guests. With us, Marc Williams, Executive Director of TxDOT. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you.
Chris Urmson, who is the CEO and co-founder of Aurora. Thank you for.
Thanks for having me.
And John Esparza, who is the Executive Director of the Texas Trucking Association. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
We have some questions prepared and also received a lot of interesting questions from the audience, so we will try to get to some of those as well. First, Marc, I'd love to start with you with a kind of a big picture question. When did Texas legislature first autonomous operate in Texas, and what was the goal of that legislation?
Sure, let me even take a further step back and just, talk about the legislature and the support that they give to the transportation industry in Texas and specifically to the Texas Department of Transportation. The economy in the state of Texas is continuing to grow at unprecedented levels, and transportation is the backbone of that. And our legislature here in Texas recognizes that they continue to support that industry, our industry, through a variety of different mechanisms, be it different types of legal statutes that allow us and allow industry to operate efficiently on our road system, to also just the funding that goes into the development of our transportation system around the state. And specifically with the autonomous vehicle industry, Texas was really at the forefront of some of the legislation to support that. And the legislation that really kicked that off here in Texas was passed all the way back in 2017, and it was Senate Bill 2205 that created the legal framework, if you will, that would allow for autonomous vehicles, both passenger and truck, to operate on public roads in Texas. And as long as those vehicles met certain requirements relative to licensing and safety standards, those vehicles were permitted under that legislation to be able to, again, operate without a driver on public roads here in Texas. And we've seen that occurring in a few areas and instances. And I know there's a number of other companies, some represented here today, that are working toward that under the capabilities and the authority that was granted by Senate Bill 2205.
Fantastic, thank you. Then Chris, on the same topic, I'm curious about an operator's perspective. Obviously, lots of AV trucking companies are chosen to operate there. So I'm curious if you can talk about how this Texas legislative approach impacts your operations, and then provide an overview of Aurora's operations and what routes you're currently driving on in Texas.
Yeah, certainly. It's foundational, right? And we can't say enough good things about the legislative approach that Texas has taken, and the regulatory approach that the Marc and his team have taken. Having the certainty to know that that the investments we're going to make are actually going to allow us to build a business is just, it's foundational. And it's why we have the footprint we do in Texas. Today, we operate pulling loads for customers on a daily basis. We're doing that in the I-10 corridor, I-10, I-20 between Fort Worth and El Paso, and then we do it on I-45 between Dallas and Houston. And these are trucks on the road today, every day. They have operators on board. They're pulling goods for great companies like FedEx, Werner, Schneider, Hirschbach. So it's really exciting to see.
Fantastic, thank you. And John, your membership is a key part of this community as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the Texas Trucking Association and about your membership?
Absolutely. And what I can say about that membership in particular is what Marc was sharing about Senate Bill 2205. It was important to the industry in the state to continue to help lead the state in what we like to say here in Texas, that if it ain't bragging if it's true, and that's about the state of the economy here in Texas. You just heard Chris talk about the reason why, or one of the reasons why, was one that can easily be glazed over, is certainties about the environment here in Texas, whether it's a taxation environment or a policy environment. You know, the fact that we worked collectively with the Senate author and that staff at that time, and even now I stay in touch and just spoke with the chief of staff of that particularly worked on that bill directly yesterday, just to check in ahead of this conversation and going, you remember back when, and all the reasons why we worked collectively as an industry to support this bill, this movement, this opportunity for the state to continue to lead in an area in which for the last couple of decades it's been known for, and that is being in continuing in a strong economy. As to your question about the members of this association, this is exactly what they look for. They want a few things. They want, one, a level field in which to compete, and we promote good public policy in this state when it comes to commercial vehicles and our small business enterprise that provides that. And I think I know for that reason, through the support of the last 3 Texas governors, so you go back several decades, they have all made that a priority. And when you continue to do that over time, it's the reason why here, as I sit here looking across the Port of Houston, that there are over 4 million TEUs that they have hit, a new all-time high here for the amount of containers coming through Houston. Not 6 or 7 hours from here, where I was earlier this week in Laredo. You went up from about 4,500 containers or 4,500 crossings today to now we're over 16,000, and some days up to 18,000. We're going to continue to grow, and that's just Laredo. I mean, just one crossing with a brand new partner or a brand new echelon and a partner with Mexico being not just the biggest economic partner that we have as a state of Texas, but as a country. It is no wonder that 1,250 miles of the 1,500 plus miles of border that we share with Mexico, that it's so much of that is in Texas. Well, you're going to continue to see Texas grow in this economic area. You're going to continue to see it be a leader when it comes to autonomy in this state, because we intend to be a leader in the safety of all trucking in this entire country. And we've got to do that here in the state of Texas. And we're so glad that Aurora and companies like Aurora have made Texas their home for this technology.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And that really gets us to a theme that we talk about frequently, is how these deployments really take strong partnerships, public sector and private sector, and organizations all working together. So Marc, curious if you can talk a little bit about what TxDOT's role is in overseeing AV operations in the state, and what do your interactions look like day to day with AV operators?
Sure. Well, we really see our role being a role of partnership and collaboration, so that we can work alongside the AV industry and the trucking industry to seize on that opportunity that John just talked about. The growth in freight, the growth in our economy is unprecedented. Texas moves 10% more freight than California and double the amount of freight of any other state. And we're growing exponentially in that area. We recently passed 30 million people in our state population-wise. We're expected to probably be approaching 50 million by 2050. That's about a 60-70% growth in population over that time period. Freight is going to more than double over that time period. So not only have we grown rapidly in the freight movement to get us to this point, but we see that continuing. And so if we're going to meet that challenge, it really requires us to be successful in these partnerships and collaborations with the trucking and the AV trucking industry. And so one of the things that we do in that role is that we collaborate through what's referred to as the State's Connected and Autonomous Vehicle Task Force. And that was established back in 2020 timeframe by at the request of Governor Abbott. And that provides the forum, if you will, for us to meet with and engage with this industry and to talk about existing laws, the regulatory environment, enhancements, and then topics like workforce development and safety. All of those are really very key for us to be successful in continuing to grow this area and industry, but very importantly, to do it successfully through focus on safety and ensuring that our operations are safe and that those operations are efficient. And that has been really the outcome of this collaboration that has been engaged with through the Autonomous Vehicle Task Force that I spoke about earlier.
Absolutely fantastic. Chris, I'm also wanting to talk to you a little bit about, obviously when AVs come to a community, it's a big change for the people who live there. What kinds of, from the operator's perspective, what kinds of plans do you make to help prepare the public and law enforcement for AV operations?
And I would start by saying that what's exciting is we see ourselves have a very similar mission to what I understand TxDOT's mission to be, right? It's how can we make the roads safer? How can we make transportation more efficient? And that, that creates a situation where it's natural for us to engage in partnership, and our team takes that opportunity and responsibility really seriously. And so, we work closely with TxDOT and other agencies. Right now, we're intending to do a roadshow along I45 where we can engage with different police officers in the communities there so they can understand about the technology and the opportunities with it so that they can make informed decisions. We think that's really important. Just recently, we worked with Frisco Police Department where we had one of our trucks be mock pulled over by one of their officers so we could understand from the officer's point of view what's working well, where should we improve things, how can we tap into the wisdom of somebody who's been doing this job for years, if not decades, so that we can position the technology to be safe on the road around these folks. They're at our front line. So it's really about, given the fact we all have the same goal, right? Make the roads safer, make them more efficient. Let's work together to see this technology come to market transition. And it's why we take time engaging with organizations like PAVE as well, of course. But we couldn't be prouder to be starting in Texas and working with the team there.
Thank you. And rarely do you get the opportunity to quote someone to themselves, but one of my favorite quotes ever in this specific topic was PAVE's launch in 2019. I remember Chris was talking to a reporter, and the reporter asked, about PAVE's launch, how do you build public trust? And I remember your answer was, we've got to earn it, which I thought is, exactly. People will trust when they see it working and see the safety measures. Thank you. And then John, back again to your association and the critical role that your members play in this. What is TxTA's role in helping to navigate these relationships between the governing entities and the operators and the workers?
Yeah, it's education, and it's exactly what Chris also mentioned, not just with the members of the legislature, but our partners like Marc. We got to be there. We got to do, we say what we do and we do what we say. If we're going to have any credibility in the actions that we take and the role that we take within the state of Texas, within the community, within our legislative community here in Texas, then we really have to work hard to ensure that the information that we provide is accurate. We live in an environment that I think, rather unfortunately, oftentimes when it comes to public policy, we don't get to fix things until they're broken, and this is it's something that we've seen for decades. I can think of our the chairman of the Senate Transportation for many years, and a sign that sits behind his desk that looks like his grandmother may have made it. It's an old stitched sign that says, "In God we trust, all else bring me data." That data is critical to the messaging, to the evidence to good public policy will and always should have good data behind it. And companies like Chris's and this, what we're doing in the world of AV requires a lot of education. It requires an awful lot of insight and thoughtful planning, and people don't know the work that's going into that. And when you see vehicles on the highway that aren't trucks in particular, and some of the things that you've seen as challenges in the news and in around the state and around the country, you look at what I've seen with what we're doing in the commercial vehicle space, what Aurora is doing, and it is amazing. And it gives me great comfort to know that this is the type of responsible space that we're working in, and companies that are taking a thoughtful approach to it, and that we've got a state that has provided an environment to be able to do that. I think all these things really come together in a great space here in Texas, and for our role is to continue to spend time, whether it's talking to reporters or working through groups like yours. And this is exactly, we've got so many people that are tuned in that want to know more and want to do their part to help educate. It's the fear of the unknown out there that we are always fighting against as an industry. And I see my role, and this association sees its role in Texas to continue to help educate with data as to what is going on versus what might be pie in the sky that's not here yet. And it's amazing the speed of which technology is moving in this space.
I think you're exactly right, John, and really want to dig into that a little bit more. You're saying about Texas's unique approach, and I know states across the country are looking at sort of how to approach this issue, and Texas has really kind of been a leader. Marc, kind of want to dig into that a little bit. Do Texas laws require permitting or licensing in Texas in order for autonomous vehicles to operate on Texas roadways without a human operator?
So Senate Bill 2205 explicitly allows for automated motor vehicles to operate in the state of Texas today. They have to abide by the same requirements that we have, that non-automated vehicles have to abide by. They have to be registered with the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles, and they have to be able to enable the Texas Department of Public Safety and other law enforcements to be able to interact with and enforce the laws of the state. But 2205 really cleared the way for autonomous vehicles to be able to move forward at the pace that the companies can ensure that their safety is where it needs to be. And I think the point about earning trust is really key, and then demonstrating and the benefits, and people trusting that those benefits are going to be there is part of this effort as we begin to see more fully autonomous deployments begin to take shape. And part of that communication, I think, and demonstrating those benefits needs to not only involve, helping people understand and trust that these vehicles are operating safely, but this is an evolution into an environment that is going to help everybody. And that is a more connected environment with vehicles connected to infrastructure and infrastructure connected to vehicles. And those have some benefits, have clear benefits, even if you're not operating an autonomous vehicle. And we're seeing opportunities with people like Aurora for us to gain information from their operations to help us in real time better respond to and do and address our own needs when it comes to safety or incidents on the roadway or things that we need to give attention to. And so this is a collaborative environment that has, in my view, the opportunity to yield a net safety gain for everybody involved. And we've got to be able to demonstrate that and have, the population as a whole trust that that's what's going to be the outcome of these deployments. It's certainly something that I believe we're going to be able to achieve, and we're already seeing that in some of these opportunities that we've talked about. But we've got to be able to bring that up to scale and again, earn that trust and demonstrate those benefits.
For sure. Just want to clarify. So, and I know because I know this has been an interesting issue in other states. So when you say driverless vehicles, that you don't require any kind of human operator, test driver?
Right, right. Driverless vehicles, independent of any
Human.
test driver operations in the car, and those have been happening today in Texas. They've been happening in other states and a few other states as well, and so they have the ability to do that under the legislative authority that was granted through 2205.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Chris, curious to follow up on that. What the 2024 looks like from your end, from an operations standpoint, and do you plan to remove a driver from the vehicles? And kind of curious, what's the biggest challenge in doing so?
Yeah, our goal for this year is to get to the point where we can meet the goal that actually Marc set for me a few years ago when we were on a panel. I remember we were together and he said something like, we've been talking about pilots for years now. When are we actually going to see this technology come to fruition? And my hope is that at the end of this year, we'll begin to see it. And our approach is very much going to be to take a crawl, walk, run stance, right? Where we're going to invest thoughtfully. We're the first company that shared a safety case, which is this kind of holistic explanation for why the vehicle should be trusted on the road to be safe. We'll get through the work there. We'll be working with our partners in Texas to bring them up to speed so that they're comfortable having their trailers hauled by a tractor that has nobody in it, and then we'll begin operation. And again, we think it's really important along the way that we're bringing our partners in government, in the communities, in our customer base along with us on that journey. And the clarity that Marc and his team have provided around that, it's when we are ready to be safe on the road, that we're good to go, so long as we meet the same obligations that humans do. We're really looking forward to being able to showcase that and start this really happening.
Fantastic. And then, John, I know it's a interesting third perspective. How do your member companies feel about the possibility of autonomous vehicles in their fleets? And just curious if overall you'd say they support the deployment of AVs in Texas.
Well, I'll say like anything else, and especially when we talk about our drivers out there, anytime you talk about change, it's a scary place, and you have a lot of questions, and that's why education is such a key component and piece of this, moving forward. But I also remind folks that, when you talk about the levels of technology that are currently at play, it begins to the everyday driver begins to grasp, oh, well, my car actually has that technology. My car has let me know that there's someone in a blind spot that I didn't know was there. There are so many instances that frankly, I think we have to capitalize on communicating this is the technology that allows us to be safer. I joined Marc in a commitment to what we say in this state is in the streak. We have a unfortunate long spell of time going back to 2000 in which we have so many roads, mind you, that we haven't had a day where we haven't had a fatality on our highways for a very, very long time. And we work collectively, not just with TxDOT, but with our DPS partners that Chris was mentioning earlier, to work towards a means to end that streak. Now, I can tell you from the trucking standpoint, when you have an average of incidents that occur in the state of Texas on a daily basis, I look at that data, again, going back to that data. And if we're involved in a 14% on average of those incidents, and we're found at fault at less than 4%, that still tells me we have a lot of work to do. We had some communication earlier today in a meeting about the percentage of folks that still aren't wearing seatbelts out there. Those are all uncontrolled space. That's all human error. What Chris is excelling in is known era. We're talking about technology that really that can absolutely make our highways safer. And when you talk to a driver about that, when you talk to a trucking company about that, well, I don't know, it's like anything else. When you talk about a change in technology, and I've seen this evolve over the last several decades, even if it was the use of auxiliary power units in our space, and 80 something, some odd companies were making auxiliary power units, there was only a handful of companies that put the money and the resources behind figuring out which one of those are going to work. And then, 90% of the 95% of the industry is waiting to see what all these big guys are going to do, because I don't have the money and resources to deploy the kind of effort and research to figure that out on my own. But I do trust that this company here and this company here, they're successful. If they narrow that down to 3 or 4 companies for me, then, then that's something that I might be able to put a foot into. So this industry gets its toes wet a little bit at a time, but fortunately we've got some forward-thinking individuals. We've got some folks that are committed. As Chris has mentioned, there are active loads moving across our roads today at this L4 technology, and safely. I've sat in those vehicles. It is incredible to see, and that is the thing that we have to spend time communicating. I'm fortunate to be part of this task force that Marc mentions. And in addition to that, part of a border trade task force through TxDOT and the Secretary of State's office, the state freight planning task force. These are the committee there, rather. These are all important efforts that help provide direction for our legislature, for our policy leaders, for agencies like Marc's, that is, where safety is job one. Tara, the thing that our companies are getting their arms around is understanding how that safety works. And no more simple description of it is, especially in the weather in Texas, that when you see incidents that occur out there, where my head goes back to is, wow, where the human eye can't see, where the human condition can't react, the technology that Chris is deploying today sees well beyond what the human can do. And I think that's what we can connect with our drivers, not just our commercial drivers, but an everyday driver, to know that as the technology advances, you're becoming more safe. And Marc and I and the rest of the motoring public can make some strides to the End the Streak campaign that we are actively working on.
And
Sure.
John, I think the point you're making there about people being able to understand it, like one of the traps that I fall into at times is we're doing all of this great safety work, but much of it feels abstract. And so one of the things that we have done is we've looked at the I45 corridor, which is where we intend to launch our trucks first. And we looked at all the fatal collisions that happened that involved a truck between 2018 and 2022, I think it was. And so there were 29 of those collisions where the Aurora driver could have been operating the vehicle. About half of them, the initiating vehicle was a truck. The initiating vehicle, if you look at it kind of as a layperson, you say that's probably the person who caused the collision. And about half of them were the light vehicle. And because the Aurora driver can operate both, we put in the seat for both of them. And we basically recreated in simulation the scenario and asked what would happen. And the amazing thing is, across all of them, none of those collisions would have occurred. Right? That's 30 events where no one would have died. And it becomes really tangible, right? I look, the one that sticks with me is there was 2 light vehicles, 2 cars, I think they were, got into a fender bender. And the people got out to do whatever they were doing. I don't know, look at the damage, exchange information, and they were on the shoulder. And a truck comes along and, for whatever reason, doesn't see the collision until late, and then veers to avoid the cars onto the shoulder and goes right through the people. And it's horrific, right? And I think the scenario was at night, so it was a difficult situation to begin with. but we run that in simulation and it's mundane. The truck slows down a little bit, makes a lane changeover and keeps going. And it comes down to one, that the Aurora driver is just always attentive, and that it has this perception horizon where it can see what's going on, not just in front of it, but 360 degrees. And it really, to a point I think you made earlier, that it's not just about the individual truck gets safer, that by being a safer driver, others on the road benefit from that as well. And each one of these we put on the road we anticipate will incrementally increase safety.
Chris, there's probably no better example that I can think of that was my grandfather, who drove a truck for 54 years. And as drivers, we all have to do, you have to pass that medical examination.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, I think about the third or fourth time he retired, it actually finally took. But when he was doing that, his trailer got smaller. I mean, that was really a stipulation of his failing eyesight, his age, and his want and desire to continue to work, was that the rules that we operate under say, well, you know what, you can still do this, but you're going to have to drive a smaller truck. So we have to recognize that there is human error. And we're also recognizing that the technology that Chris brings to bear absolutely makes these highways safer. And in my experience, sitting in that vehicle that I rode for an hour, and we talked about all the scenarios that we might encounter, and we just about encountered all of them. And the ones that continue to strike me the most are when the truck begins to act. The truck begins to adjust, and it occurs to me, okay, why are we doing this? It's already seeing something out there that I can't even see. And it is starting to make an adjustment based on what's coming at the speed that it's coming, the speed that we're going, taking all these things into consideration. That is frankly at a quicker pace than any driver can do.
Right. Thank you for that. And also your grandfather is the perfect segue to the next topic. I really wanted to talk a little bit about. And it's another place where Texas has really shown true leadership through the task force. Marc, you can talk a little bit about how Texas is looking at the AV industry for job growth and expanding the workforce there.
Well, I want to go back to the safety conversation.
Sure.
The part of that messaging, needs to point out that the single biggest contributor to crashes and fatalities on our roads are the people. And if we can eliminate human error from that, that is our path to get to that road to zero goal. And the AV industry is key to that. And as we're moving toward deployment and looking at the things that we need in that to meet that demand that's there, we need the AV industry to be part of that. And because I've talked earlier about the amount of the freight growth that we are seeing, and the ability of the industry to keep up with that, AV trucking is going to be very, very crucial to that. And so it's going to need that collaboration with the workforce and the development of that workforce. But sitting here in the transportation industry today, the people that I surround myself with is a lot different than who was in this industry 30 years ago. You've got people that are involved in data analysis, data science, now artificial intelligence, and the AV industry, and that's a really great skill set. But it's a skill set that we've got to continue to develop with our workforce and attract those individuals that are drawn to that into the transportation industry, and folks like Aurora and some of our other AV operators in the state are great partners in that, in that bringing that collaboration, not just between us and them at the state level, but beginning that interaction with our universities and even our high schools as well. This is a great industry for those that are drawn to some of the blue collar technical fields as well, and really great chance for people at all different levels of educational and training experience to get involved and to really have very successful and dynamic careers. And that's part of that messaging that we're working to get out through groups like the AV Task Force and bringing in these educational institutions that are going to be really vital for us to be able to have success in this area. It's not about it. To me, it's not so much about, you know, taking somebody that was doing this and now, hey, you know, this is going away and now you got to go do this. I think we're going to continue to still have, you know, a lot of the traditional transportation careers that we have today, and we're going to need those for well into the foreseeable future with the amount of freight that we have growing. But we've got to expand on those and bring in other opportunities to move that freight efficiently and effectively, and that's what's exciting and what's critical about what we're doing here in the AV freight industry here in Texas.
Perfectly said. And Chris, as someone who's running one of these companies, can you talk a little bit about Aurora's job footprint and specifically what kinds of skills and jobs you're looking for? What does that mean for job creation?
Yeah, so Aurora today is about 1,800 people, and we have an incredibly diverse set of people at the company, both you know, in the way you would conventionally use diverse, but also across skill sets and job experience and all of that. We have about half the companies here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I am today, chunk in California, in Montana, in Colorado, Seattle. So we're all over the place. But importantly, in Texas is where we have almost all of our operations on road, and we've got about 200 folks in Texas. I just want to piggyback a little bit off what Marc said, that it's absolutely true that the majority of collisions that happen on the road are due to a human making some kind of mistake. At the same time, these are people doing a job that we absolutely need, right? The country does not exist without their hard work and their sacrifice. But it's a really tough job, right? It's days, if not weeks away from home. It's a shortened life expectancy. It's missing out critical moments in their families' lives that if you're a truck driver in America, you're 10 times more likely to die on the job than the average American. And so that leads to the fact that we don't have enough people willing to do the job. And the American Trucking Association estimates that over the next, I think it was decade, and John, you probably know this better than I do, we need to find 1 million new truck drivers, which is incredible. And we're just not going to be able to fill those roles with people who want to do it. And so finding a way for automation to support the incredible men and women who do this today, and then opening up new interesting opportunities in freight logistics, whether it's folks working at terminal operations and doing the pre-flight or the pre-trip checks and making sure that we're interacting with customers appropriately, or the fleet support technicians who are the mechanics of the 21st century, right? Who are servicing these trucks with this new high technology stuff on it, to our folks that work at our command centers. We call them our command center specialists, which are 21st century dispatchers that are working with the vehicles and helping support, make sure freight gets where it needs to go. Our fleet dispatch folks. And of course, we have many commercial driver's license personnel on staff with us who are helping us develop the technology. And I liken it back to in 1918 when Henry Ford produced the first automobile. That wasn't it. He didn't shut up shop and engineers went away and it's just like crank them out, right? The auto industry has only grown in its need for across the blue to white collar jobs. And by kind of starting our business in Texas, we, because of the scale of freight there, because of the regulatory certainty, because of the partnerships we've been able to build, I think it's, Texas is going to be in a tremendous position to benefit from that, and we'll continue to invest there for many years to come.
Fantastic. Yeah, love the way you said it. Agree completely. And we all owe so much to truck drivers and the sacrifice they make. John, then also want to hear your perspective about that. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the driver shortage in the trucking industry. I'm curious about your thoughts. Do AVs have the ability to help to fill that gap? And what does that mean for the hardworking folks in who are your members?
Oh, absolutely. And the reason why that we need Chris to be successful, the reason why we need AV in this space is because imagine that Venn diagram that Marc started out with the amount of folks that are driving today, the amount of freight that and the growth of freight. The data tells us every time we predict the growth of freight, we keep missing it. It grows greater, or whether you're here in the port or on our borders. There is a thirst for freight through the state of Texas. And think about our geographic location with the rest of the country, with the amount of containers that are coming in through the 20 plus Gulf ports that we have just in the Texas Gulf. Already the amount of the over 1,200 miles that I mentioned of Texas border and all of the borders and all of the crossings that we have here. And our ability through our transportation network that feeds the rest of the country, not just freight coming out of our ports and out of our ports of entry to Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, but all the way up to Canada, to Minnesota. We are just in a great geographic position as a state to continue this growth. If you just look at the geography alone and all the ports of entry that I've mentioned. But in addition to that, unfortunately, we are retiring a segment of this, a demographic segment of our workforce that is much greater and larger than any that is coming up, either whether they're current or they're coming up. And then we take such a smaller piece of that demographic and put them into trucking. So it is a factor that we're fearful of. And that's why we've been talking about a driver shortage for 16 years that I've been sitting here doing this for this industry. It is constant. It may be the top of the list one year or third on the list the next year, but it is constantly growing and growing, to Chris's point. And because of that, if just that, there's 1,000 people moving to this state every day, over 1,000 people, over 1,000 people being born in this state every day. With the population alone, just for Texas, we know there is an appetite for freight that is unquenchable. And if we don't have drivers, in which we don't have enough, AV it's not the solution. It is a big part of how we solve this problem over time. And it will need to play an increasing role in that. And ultimately, and you'll hear it, and I do hear it, and we spend a lot of time talking to drivers, whether it's on the radio or they're calling into the office, is their fear. Well, their fears, I have continued to say, can be put to rest, because they will be able to do their job. If anything, the quality of a driver will increase in a time where I'm most fearful, and spend a lot of time here talking about our law enforcement community. We have people getting into this industry because of that need that shouldn't be getting into this industry. And the data shows that out. If there are people out there, humans behind the wheel, that aren't qualified to be behind the wheel, and they're getting behind the wheel at a greater pace than they ever has been, because of the need to move freight, as Marc has pointed out, it is no wonder that we have AV at a time critical to us as an industry to be entering into a space where I can tell you that the quality of safety of an AV, of an Aurora driver, is going to be greater than any driver that we have out there. And I speak to you, I say that as a son of a driver, as a grandson as a driver, as a great grandson of a driver. It is just a technological fact. And I take us back to when I'm communicating this to people that are behind passenger vehicles on a daily basis. Consider the technology that you have in the vehicle today and how that helps you be safer. And imagine applying that at the highest of levels when it comes to 80,000 pounds.
Absolutely. I think we're at time, but I just want to try to sneak in one final question for Marc. PAVE educates the public, but a big part of that, what we do is try to help communities and states prepare how to get their communities ready for AVs. And obviously Texas has been exceptionally successful in attracting AV companies. Curious what advice you would give to other jurisdictions looking to do the same. And also a audience member asked us if what Texas can do to help lobby the federal government to adopt similar guidelines. What advice do you have for others?
Well, sure. I think first of all, I would say thank you for having this forum. This has been a great discussion, and Chris, John really thoroughly enjoyed the conversation here today. Communication engagement is critical. You know, you've got to reach out, be partners with the industry, both on the trucking side and the technology side, and they've got to be partners with you. You know, you can't set these things up and shape this in a silo or in isolation. That collaboration and that engagement and communication is critical. But I would also say, very importantly, as I think has been emphasized by both Chris and John today, lead with safety. You've got to lead with safety, and the thing that we are communicating, and I know the AV industry, our Aurora is doing this, is all decisions are based on safety. We've got goals that we want to achieve and deployments that we want to see, but we're not going to compromise on that. And I think that needs to be clearly emphasized, whether it's convincing your local jurisdiction to engage in this area, or even, you know, having that conversation at the federal level. That leading with safety is got to be in the mix.
That is perfectly articulated, and safety is the North Star. So thank you. And thanks to all of you, to Marc and Chris and John for joining us today. And thanks to the audience for being here. Join us next week for part 2 of this conversation about Texas and trucking. And really appreciate you all being here today. Thank you so much.